A 9-0 Supreme Court ruling that could save your gun rights. Picture this. The highest court in the land speaks in harmony. 9 justices, unanimous. They rule that police cannot simply walk into your home and seize your guns under a vague caretaker role. That case was Caniglia versus Strom, and it set a radical precedent protecting the sanctity of the home. Now, a new challenge, Case versus Montana, is before the court and threatens to widen the exception instead of narrowing it. The question: can police enter and confiscate firearms under what they call emergency aid without a warrant? If the court flips, your right to keep and bear arms may face a brand new danger. In this video, we'll break down what the 9-0 ruling in Caniglia actually declared and why it matters, how Case versus Montana builds upon or erodes that foundation, the stakes for every gun owner in America, not just Montana, what you must do now to protect your rights. Welcome to Firearms Law Advisor, legal clarity, no hype. If you believe in staying ready, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Chapter 1. The groundbreaking unanimous decision. In 2021, the Supreme Court issued a decisive 9-0 opinion in Caniglia versus Strom. The court held that the so-called community caretaking exception cannot justify warrantless entry into the home and firearm seizure. Police entered Edward Caniglia's home after a shooting risk report and took his guns without a warrant. The court ruled that Katie-type vehicle exceptions do not apply to the home. It reaffirmed that the home remains the most protected place under the Fourth Amendment. It declared that any emergency aid exception must still obey traditional warrant standards. By closing that loophole, the court sent a message: the right to keep arms in one's house is not suspended during welfare checks. That case laid a foundation not just for gun rights, but for the sanctity of the home itself. Chapter 2. Case v. Montana, the new battle. Now the Supreme Court is poised to hear Case versus Montana, a dramatically different scenario but one built on the same constitutional architecture. 4 officers entered Mr. Case's home without a warrant after a telephone report of erratic behavior and a perceived handgun in view. The entry came after 40 minutes outside, then an unlocked door allowed access. Officers claimed they saw a black object behind a closet curtain and shot the occupant. The Montana Supreme Court permitted the entry under the emergency aid doctrine without requiring probable cause. Petitioners argue this undermines the precedent from Caniglia by lowering the standard for home entry. If the court allows Montana's reasoning, it may open the door to broader entries and firearm seizures under the label of emergency. Chapter 3. Emergency aid versus probable cause. The heart of this case is the legal tug-of-war between reasonableness and probable cause. Case's petition raises the question: can police enter a home based on less than probable cause because they believe an emergency might exist? Montana's brief supports a standard based on objective reasonableness rather than probable cause. Case's counsel argues that only a probable cause standard aligns with Fourth Amendment history. The DOJ's involvement amplifies national implications for gun and home rights. If reasonableness becomes the new default, the warrant requirement for homes could be significantly weakened. This chapter could decide if your home remains a fortress or becomes more exposed to government intrusion. Chapter 4. The Fourth Amendment's fortress is at stake. Caniglia reaffirmed that the Fourth Amendment protects the home as a core zone of liberty. Case versus Montana puts that fortress at risk by seeking to expand the emergency exception. Historically, warrantless entries into homes required strict criteria: imminent peril, destruction of evidence, or hot pursuit. Caniglia reminded the court that those criteria apply even when welfare checks are involved. The case proposes expanding the exception such that the perception of danger alone might justify entry. Gun owners face the prospect of law enforcement acting on uncertain tips and gaining access to their arms. If the doctrine shifts, it becomes not just a gun issue but a constitutional Second Amendment issue. Chapter 5. What the 9-0 ruling really meant for guns. The unanimous decision in Caniglia was about more than just one man's firearms. It sent a broader message about rights tied to the home. The court rejected the idea that the government's caretaking role gives it blanket access to your home. It explicitly protected the right to keep firearms within the home against unreviewed government seizure. It set a precedent that even non-criminal welfare interventions cannot erase constitutional protections. Gun rights advocates gained an indirect but powerful legal shield for arms in the home. That shield now faces a direct strike. Case versus Montana could either reinforce that protection or erode it. Chapter 6. State and federal lawyers mobilize. When the DOJ grants participation in a case, the stakes become national. Montana's matter has drawn federal attention, and that means everything you own could be affected. The Trump-era Justice Department joined the case supporting a lowered standard for entry. Gun rights groups are closely watching for implications across states. States with high gun ownership and expansive warrantless entry statutes may use this as a test run. If entry standards fall, federal and state governments may begin new enforcement strategies. The legal landscape is shifting, and your rights may depend on what this court decides. Chapter 7. Gun owners must watch this closely. This is not some obscure courtroom drama unfolding in the background. For responsible gun owners across America, what the Supreme Court decides here could reshape how you're treated by law enforcement in your own home. The protections you think are guaranteed may be more fragile than you realize. A shift in precedent could allow law enforcement to justify entering your home without a warrant more often. Gun owners who legally store firearms could still face scrutiny under looser emergency standards. Officers acting on vague welfare calls could trigger firearm seizures even in peaceful households. Any ruling that weakens the Fourth Amendment's home protections will disproportionately impact law-abiding gun owners. The idea that you are secure in your home is a foundational American belief, but this case reminds us that even the most fundamental rights can be tested when vague legal terms like emergency aid go unchecked. The time to pay attention is now, not after it's too late. Chapter 8. The Supreme Court's upcoming moment. Oral arguments for Case v. Montana are more than just procedural hearings. They are the final public battleground before the justices deliberate and potentially reshape your Fourth Amendment rights. Every argument, every question, and every response will be scrutinized by gun rights experts nationwide. The justices will question how far the emergency aid exception should extend into the home. Expect a deep dive into whether officer discretion outweighs the need for a warrant in emotionally charged situations. Legal analysts are watching closely for hints at how conservative and liberal justices will align on this question. The outcome may also set a precedent on when officers can seize firearms without prior suspicion of a crime. This isn't about what happened in Montana alone. It is about whether the Supreme Court will hold the line drawn in Caniglia or quietly shift the boundaries to allow more warrantless actions against peaceful gun owners across the nation. History could be made in those oral arguments. Chapter 9. The National Domino Effect for Gun Laws. What starts as a Montana case can end as a national turning point. If the court favors warrantless entry under broad emergencies, the floodgates will open. Gun laws in dozens of states could begin shifting overnight, not through legislatures, but through new legal interpretations. States may expand their own emergency aid statutes to match the court's ruling, accelerating firearm seizure protocols. Courts may lower the standard needed for probable cause when firearms are present in reported domestic or welfare incidents. Red flag law frameworks may use this precedent to justify entry without prior judicial approval. Gun rights advocacy groups may be forced to litigate a wave of new Fourth Amendment violations across the country. Gun owners from Florida to California must understand this isn't just about legal language. It is about how rights erode silently through exceptions, loopholes, and unchecked discretion. One misstep from the court could reshape the legal environment for decades. Chapter 10. Your clear action plan. When legal boundaries blur, your responsibility as a gun owner becomes more urgent. This case serves as a signal that the lines are being redrawn. If you want to protect your home, your firearms, and your rights, here is what you must do starting today. Study your state's laws on emergency aid, warrantless entry, and firearm seizure protocols. Store firearms in a lawful, secure manner to avoid any appearance of risk or instability. Document interactions with law enforcement, especially during wellness or emergency checks. Join legal defense funds and stay connected with advocacy organizations that are actively involved in these court fights. Your rights depend not only on the Constitution, but on your vigilance. The ruling in Case v. Montana will define the next chapter of home defense in America. Make sure you are ready, informed, and legally protected before that chapter begins. The fight to protect your home and liberty is now. We began with Caniglia versus Strom, a unanimous declaration that the government has no general caretaking right to enter your home and take your guns. Now, in Case v. Montana, we face a decision that could either confirm that firewall or chip away at it forever. This is not just a legal battle, it is a fight for your right to be left alone, for your right to defend your home, and for your right to own firearms without fear of sudden intrusion under a vague emergency label. This is where the rubber meets the road for the Second and Fourth Amendments. If you care about those rights, do not wait. Like this video so others see it. Subscribe for future legal breakdowns. And most importantly, share this with someone who owns a gun because their rights are on the line too. Let's stand together as informed Americans, not passive bystanders. This ruling will define the next chapter of liberty. Make sure your voice is part of the conversation.